Tickling the dragon's tail. Physicist Louis Slotin was standing inside a laboratory in Los Alamos, New Mexico. He was conducting an experiment that his colleagues had nicknamed tickling the dragon's tail. The experiment relied on bringing two beryllium-coated half-spheres of plutonium close together. This assembly was known as the Demon Core. And keep in mind, this core had already killed another scientist before this. Slotin was holding the two half-spheres with nothing separating them but a screwdriver. There were no safety devices or protective shields. 7 other scientists were standing nearby watching. Slotin had performed this experiment many times before, sometimes with his hands, sometimes with a screwdriver. He knew the danger well. As soon as the two halves touched, the nuclear reaction would go critical, releasing a lethal burst of radiation. But Slotin was confident, his movements calm and calculated. Suddenly, the screwdriver slipped from his hand and the two halves touched. A blue flash blasted through the room. A harsh light filled the lab in an instant. Slotin tasted a sour, strange, metallic taste in his mouth, and in that same moment, he understood what had happened. Without hesitation, he reached out and pried the two halves apart with his bare hands, stopping the reaction. His colleagues lived, but he did not. Seconds later, nausea overtook him and he ran outside to vomit. The medical team arrived quickly, but there was nothing they could do. Slotin had absorbed over 1,000 rads of radiation, a fatal dose. The countdown began. Over the next 9 days, his body began to collapse. The radiation was destroying cells faster than the body could replace them. His white blood cell count plummeted. Painful blisters appeared on the hand that touched the core. His skin began to peel off in sheets. Internal bleeding began as the lining of his intestines eroded. By the 3rd day, the pain was constant and excruciating. His hand swelled horribly and the tissues began to die from the inside. It was a terrible loss. His digestive system failed and doctors tried blood transfusions, but his bone marrow could no longer produce new cells. The radiation had completely destroyed his DNA, making recovery impossible. His organs began shutting down one by one. His heart struggled to pump blood, his lungs filled with fluid. The pain became unbearable, and they had to administer morphine constantly. On May 30th, 9 days after the blue flash, Louis Slotin died. His body had been destroyed from the inside out, cell by cell, by a force invisible to the naked eye.
Wetterhahn was one of the world's leading experts on heavy metal poisoning. She worked at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire and was 48 years old. She had spent years studying how toxic metals destroy the human body. On August 14, 1996, she was conducting an experiment on the effects of mercury on DNA repair mechanisms. She was handling a substance called dimethylmercury, a material so toxic that a single drop could kill a human. Karen knew the danger well. She was wearing latex gloves and working under a fume hood. Suddenly, a drop or two fell onto her gloved hand. She followed protocol immediately, removed the gloves, and washed her hands thoroughly. The latex was supposed to protect her, so she felt no anxiety. The substance touched her for only a few seconds before being removed. She continued her work normally, unaware that the mercury had already penetrated the glove and entered her body through her skin. Months passed, and Karen felt perfectly fine. She taught, conducted research, and spent time with her family. By January, 5 months after the accident, there was nothing alarming. Then, she began slurring her words while giving lectures. Her speech became heavy and unclear. She started losing her balance while walking on campus. Within weeks, the symptoms worsened rapidly. She could no longer walk alone. Her vision became blurry and then began to darken. Her hearing weakened, and her hands stopped responding to her brain's commands. Doctors ran tests and discovered that the mercury had reached her central nervous system. The neurons in her brain were being destroyed. The mercury had been waiting quietly in her blood, gathering itself until it crossed the blood-brain barrier. Now, it was destroying her nervous system step by step. Motor control vanished. She could no longer speak, move, or even recognize her family. Brain scans showed widespread damage spreading through the tissue. By February, she fell into a coma. Her brain continued to deteriorate, and the mercury destroyed more neural connections every day. There was no cure and no way to extract it. The poison that had been killing her for months without her realizing it finally took its toll. On June 8, 1997, 10 months after the 2 drops touched her glove, Karen Wetterhahn died. The poison she had spent her life studying had been inside her the whole time. The deadly fireball. George Wilhelm Rickman. On August 6, 1753, physicist George Wilhelm Rickman was attempting to replicate Benjamin Franklin's famous kite experiment from his home in St. Petersburg, Russia. The 42-year-old man had built a device designed to attract and measure lightning. In the afternoon, dark clouds began to gather over the city, and the sound of thunder was clear in the distance. Rickman saw this as his chance. He had a metal rod extending from the roof of the house connected to an iron rod suspended by silk threads inside a room in his study. Beneath the rod was a metal indicator that moved along a scale whenever electric current passed through the system. Unlike Franklin's experiment, Rickman's device did not have a ground wire, meaning the entire electrical charge was entering the lab directly. As the storm intensified, Rickman called his assistant, an engraver named Sokolov, to witness the experiment. They entered the room together. The device was already reacting to the atmospheric charge and the indicator was moving slightly. Rickman leaned in to take a reading. Suddenly, and without warning, a pale blue ball of light appeared next to the iron rod. The fireball was roughly the size of a fist. It hovered for a fraction of a second and then shot with terrible speed toward Rickman's face. It struck him directly in the forehead with violent force. The electrical discharge penetrated his skull and traveled through his entire body. The shock was so powerful that it blew out his left shoe from the bottom, and he was thrown backward by the force of the explosion, losing consciousness instantly. A moment later, the assistant woke up to find Rickman lying on the floor. There was a small red spot on his forehead, where the fireball had entered. His body was completely still, and smoke was still rising from his clothes. There was no pulse and no breath. The electric shock had stopped his heart instantly. The iron rod above him was twisted, and part of it had melted from the intensity of the discharge. George Wilhelm Rickman became the first person in history recorded to die during an electrical experiment. The ball lightning traveled from the sky to the iron rod and entered directly into his brain in less than a second.